All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, on a Wednesday school night. Thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Mike Grant. I work here at the Marin County Office of Education, and we are very honored here tonight to have Betty Durso from No Bully to help us explore and understand one of the greatest challenges in this day and age in parenting, navigating the world of social media. It's kind of big and it's kind of intense, and I don't think there's any answers. Easy answers, but I know that Betty comes with research-based, evidence-based information that will help us in our efforts to help raise our kids in a healthy and safe way. So how about a round of applause for Betty, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mike. So welcome. Thank you for being here tonight, taking the time on behalf of your child and for all children in your lives. All right, here we go. So a little bit about No Bully, myself. No Bully's been around for about a little more than a dozen years. And as you can see, it has a mission and a goal to really work on eradicating bullying. And we work with hundreds of schools in the nation from coast to coast, and working with school teams and who in turn work with children. So they work with the kids at their schools. And we also have a global presence and impact on bullying. Myself, I've been working in education for many decades, about 40 years to be in that range, in a variety of capacities, working from kindergarten age, preschool age even, all the way to teaching adults at university level. So I've also been a superintendent and a principal, teacher, classroom teacher, and as I said, teaching university. I ran a program for new teachers in my county, and then I started working for No Bully about 6 years ago. So doing in the capacity of being a facilitator, a trainer, and then I also help develop materials and curriculum for them. So I'm doing a little bit of everything for them. So that's about me and No Bully. Tonight it'll be in 3 parts. So the first part is what I call the what. So the what has to do with what is this digital media landscape we have. And Common Sense Media is an organization that has done 2 reports, and we're going to kind of look at highlights from those reports. So that's going to be the what. The second part is going to be what I call the so what. So now we know what the what is. It's how does that affect our kids? What is the impact on our kids? And then the last part is the now what for you. So now that I know this, what can I do about it? And what can I go home and do even tomorrow? Because I always feel like when I take time to be somewhere and learn something, I always want to glean something new and learn something, and it may be a whole different way. Maybe I knew something, but it's a whole different way of looking at it. So it helps me to take some next steps for myself and for, if I was a classroom teacher, for my students, if I'm a parent, then with my own child. As I said, Common Sense is the reports we're going to look at, and they're also a partner and a sponsor of No Bully. And before we start, so some of your concerns, what worries you, what fears do you have, what are your concerns about social media, the digital world of social media? Anybody? Go ahead.
Just the influence on the kids.
Influence on your child? Okay. Others? Pit in my stomach. Pit in your stomach. Yeah. Pit in your stomach because you don't, of what you're afraid of or what you don't know?
Probably both.
Both. Okay. Yeah.
Probably both. Like how do you navigate?
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Go ahead, and then back there.
I have a freshman and she's just new to all this, and it's like, oh, she has to be on Snapchat because that's where everyone's communicating, but it's one of the worst ones for a parent. And just being I don't know, having to trust and let go a little bit, that's hard. And then the ubiquity of it, just that it's in her room. Is she checking it? She washes her hair, then she checks it, then she does. It's like, so I'm just coming up with a rule like, okay, I need to keep it out of her room,
Right. Right. The constant part of it. It sounds like part of what you're saying is.
And the constant interruption. What's that going to do to your developing brain?
Yes, what will it do to the brain? We're going to talk about the brain tonight, so we'll definitely be talking about that back there, and then go ahead.
I was pretty much going to say the same thing, that the time consumption,
Time.
the overwhelming ubiquity of it, how do you ever leave the social scene of school behind? Can you leave it behind?
Right, right.
You never get a break.
Yes.
I wonder what that even does to mental health.
Yes.
Get some perspective.
Yep, yep, we're going to be talking about that as well. So yeah, yes, the never-ending 24/7, truly, yeah.
Does it change who you're going to be, who you are, who you're going to be? How do I, as a parent, help navigate when I don't understand half of it?
Yeah, good.
I'm not that age. I try to have people, young people at work explain to me how to use some of that stuff, but I don't get half of it.
Right,
And my daughter is really good about covering it up. But as you know, they would be. But, I just want to help make it safe for her.
right,
And then also, when she gets to be an adult, like, job places are going to be looking at stuff,
right, right.
long-term consequences.
Yes, yes. So it does feel like these kids are digital natives, we're not. And, no matter what our age, we still have that generational difference between our children and who we are. And yes, they do know a whole lot. How will it affect who they become? That's one of your concerns. So yeah, that kind of wraps up into a few of these others.
The last concern is addictive. I think we're all on the same page, but the addiction's like, I'm okay with it. I have middle schoolers, I want them to be social. I know their friends are most and foremost important, in a way. And I'm like, be social, interact as much as you want, but it's a different, it's that addiction.
The addiction, yep. We're going to talk about the addiction as well. One,
Yeah, I was going to say, this sort of like obsession to post constantly and how many likes will I get? And, it's kind of like this rivalry thing that becomes this mentality. And then there's also this obsession to connect. And then there's this whole sense, obviously, that, a lot of times you're on all these different sites and you have no idea, like, who are you really talking to?
right,
You have no idea the authenticity of maybe someone you're talking to.
right,
Unless you personally know them,
right.
which is not always the case.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. It's that, the unknown world out there that they're tapping into, and you can't be looking over their shoulder every minute of every day, and that becomes difficult. Okay, one last one, go ahead.
The job in which parents of newborn babies.
Ah,
And I'm trying to get them to be off the phone, pay attention to their child when their child's looking at them.
right,
And I'm starting parenting classes with people, and I'm trying to get them to understand. It's like having a depressed parent, they don't give you the reciprocity. And so kids
Right.
growing up not able to read.
yes, yes. Yeah, we talked about that last week in our we did a 0 to 8 and talked about how that affects infants, infants, definitely toddlers, but definitely infants too. What about the upside? What about some of social media's strengths? What have you seen?
Well, my son is just completely involved with TED Talk.
Ah, TED Talks, yay.
He was playing him, Mom, we gotta watch the TED Talk upstairs. And I'm like, all right, coffee. And so there's a lot of class.
Yep, yeah,
And he's on YouTuber that's planted a million trees. And
Right.
Just some really cool stuff.
yes, it's out there, it's out there.
We are touring schools. He's a sixth grader. We've been at charter school, K through 6. And I didn't realize, it's got a flip phone. But literally, this is our numbers. Don't text the press.
Right,
And so it's been in this little bubble, I feel like, because we're touring schools for next year.
oh yeah,
This huge thing that all the parents are talking about. It's like, oh my gosh, social. Like,
right, yes,
and they're like, oh yeah.
yeah,
These are all over social
Yep.
media. And I realized this whole stuff that
right, right, right. Okay, any other positive? Okay.
There's so many educational growth possibilities, whether it's finding out about, internships or grants for them for school, or, just even learning, different subjects, whether it's math or,
Mm-hmm,
I feel like, and because that's their way of connecting.
Right.
They tend to be very focused with it and actually, want to do it. So, there's a lot of positive learning capabilities and growth opportunities.
right. So growth, creativity, connections, all of those. Go ahead, here and there.
Oh, I was just going to say, FaceTime, I think, is so great.
Yes, yeah,
Talking to their friends, they're
Yeah.
doing homework together, eyes, it's nicer than the text.
It sure is, yeah. At least you have the visual. That really makes a difference.
In my day, we went to the library to learn things.
Right.
Card catalog. I don't think anybody knows what that is.
What a card catalog is, yeah, I know.
But like Google and all that stuff, where you can learn so much about so many things.
Right.
I mean, you can watch open heart surgery.
Yes,
Fix your vacuum
yeah,
cleaner.
yes, yeah.
I just think that's amazing. You can
It
find out
is.
who's any good at fixing a vacuum
Right,
cleaner.
right, right. So, yeah, there are positive and there's challenges. I don't even look at it as negative because it's challenges. It's how you shape it. And essentially what you're looking at here has to do with digital media and balance. You always want to have some kind of balance. So you want that within yourself, for your child, within your family. You always want to keep your tabs on quality. Make sure you have clear expectations, then you don't have as much conflict. And we also want to make these kids who are media savvy. But the bottom line is basically saying this media digital world is moving way too fast for simple answers. And Mike said that up front. It's not like handing you a prescription and saying, okay, just do this and everything's going to be fine. It's not going to be like that because it's ever changing. Exponentially, it's ever changing. So just to be aware of that, and that we'll walk out of here tonight with a foundational base and knowledge and some practical tips. But, everything is just going to continue to change. The important thing is you just stay on top of it as well. Okay, so moving into part one. So as I said, Common Sense Media did these two reports. One of them was called the Common Sense Census, and the one that was just completed last year, 2019. And then the other one, it gathered information. It was a large-scale study, gathering information from teens about their media use, where social life is the kids' voices. It's the kids being very frank and upfront about how they use, when they use, and you're going to see two video clips about this. So the first video clip is from the Common Sense Census, and I will tell you right now, it's a 1-minute video clip. It's fast. Oh my goodness, I tried to slow this thing down, can't slow it down. So instead what I did was I took the highlights from it, and you'll see it in the following slides. One of your handouts, the one that shows, let me just hold it up for a second. So this handout that has all these bullets on it, pretty much are what you see in the slides. So you don't have to take notes, because I don't want you have to, I'd rather you kind of be able to focus versus taking a bunch of notes. So fast, but we'll follow up with the slides. So some of these highlights is the time. So how much time are kids using? And ages 5 to 8 is about 3 hours a day. 1 hour is on a mobile device. So that's a change because they didn't used to have so many mobile devices back in 2015, the last time that they actually did. 9 to 12, 6 hours, and 13 to 18, 9 hours. So it's a lot of time that these kids are using their device for a variety of things. 95% are going to have their own mobile device to do a variety of things, and pretty much as we were talking about, 24/7. and 24/7 in a variety of settings too. So there are inside, outside, in school, at home, at friends, at the mall, in the movies, whatever they're doing, that mobile device is with them. So they have 7. And 45% of kids are saying that they're on their phones almost constantly. I think it's way more, to be honest with you. Some more highlights. The jump from 2012 to 2018 in terms of that multiple times a day engaging with social media has doubled. 54%, you know what, this is really distracting when I use it. And so they actually acknowledge that they are feeling distracted with their own friends while they actually have this device and that they're using. And 44% say that they're frustrated with their friends for doing this. And I always say, whatever it is that you're frustrated with somebody or you don't like with somebody, it's kind of like looking in a mirror because it's usually something you don't like in yourself. And that's true for all of us. But so kids are kind of looking in the mirror of, I hate when you do this, as if they'd never do it because they're doing it as well. But up to 72% of them are saying, but I feel like I have to respond to this. This is essential. I can't let it go. So this is the video that you're going to hear the kids' voices. So this is the kids that are going to be talking openly about their use of their mobile device and social media.
I check my phone a lot.
More than I can count.
I check it usually when I wake up in the morning. Before school, on the bus ride to school.
During school.
A couple times each class.
At lunch.
Probably check it at break. After school.
Walking home.
While I'm doing homework. I'm constantly checking my phone until I go to bed. Definitely been emotionally affected by social media, maybe even depressed, but it's hard to say which causes what sometimes.
Sometimes when I'm sad, I like to communicate with my friends on social media, and that really makes me feel less lonely.
I never really feel depressed or anything like that, just because there's always somebody to talk to and always somebody that's there for you. That's kind of a good thing about social media.
On social media, you can talk to people, but you can't really get your emotion across. I sometimes wish that it wasn't a thing so I could just hang out with my friends and play basketball or do other things like that.
After getting my phone, in-person interactions, it's been replaced by text and call and FaceTime. Yeah, when I do my homework, my phone is normally next to me, and I definitely do check it, and sometimes I get sidetracked.
If my parents saw some of the things that I saw on social media, I think they would be very shocked.
I've heard racist and sexist comments in comment sections. There's a lot of bullying, obviously, that goes on online, which is horrible.
They will comment something rude with language that is offensive, and people make it very personal and hurtful. They just want to invalidate you and your feelings.
I don't really wish for the days when I didn't have my phone because it gives me so much stuff that I cherish. The thing I love most about social media is to stay connected with my friends. Over spring break, I broke my phone and I didn't have it for a week and everyone thought I was dead. It was just so impossible to contact me. I like to make artwork and write, and so sometimes I'll use that as a platform to display my art.
I think I really enjoy social media when I am discussing issues with like-minded people or talking about things I'm very passionate about.
I think it's a mixture of everything that's on social media that makes it so cool. There's the Snap shows, there's Snapchat streaks.
It's just something that's a habit to do when I get on my phone.
It's something new. It's always exciting. It keeps your attention, and that constant turnover of adding new things definitely contributes to the amount of time people spend on it.
Out of the mouths of babes.
I'm going to try this. I don't know, that one's starting to act funny.
I know, it did seem like it was acting funny. Okay. An upgrade. So you heard them really speaking honestly, and it was up and downsides. And they were pretty honest about the downsides in terms of the distraction. So that was what you heard a lot from them. And you also heard the upsides in terms of connecting, being creative. Some of the things that you were speaking, the very things that you were speaking about. One of the things that you heard for them saying is how much they are checking their phone, and that they do this pretty constant. And there is recognition out there now that companies are intentionally designing these products to really market and pull kids in, because kids are constantly feeling what's referred to as FOMO, the fear of missing out. And that's real. That feeling that kids have is genuine, is real, that they honestly do feel that they're going to miss out on something. But just know that behind every app that a kid is using, every game, any social platform, is a group of marketers. Just like, marketing food, making food tantalizing. Well, let's make this digital piece tantalizing as well. We all know that notifications are, it's constant. You hear the notification, you feel the notification. If your phone is off, something vibrates. And all of us, if we're honest with ourselves and we say, okay, I'm going to put my phone over here, but if you actually can see your phone and it lights up and it lights up and it lights up, even if you don't have it on, but you know there's something happening, you're distracted in here. Which is why I said just go ahead and put your phones away tonight so you wouldn't have that. It's very hard to separate yourself from that. And kids pretty much are not choosing to separate themselves from that. So they have this external trigger which creates the internal trigger. And that internal trigger could be a number of things. It could be, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, but it also can be just curiosity. I wonder who that is. I wonder what this is about. And sometimes kids are just bored and they want to see what it is. So as I was writing this, a couple weeks ago, then I came across this New York Times article 2 Sundays ago, not this past Sunday. There were 2 articles in the New York Times. One of them was called The Known Unknown. And it was all about manipulation. So I thought I just had to throw these 2 slides in here. So I added 2 slides that came from the New York Times article. And essentially what this article was saying is that there was really, it was about more than just Facebook. But this one piece is what I pulled out, which is that the researchers at Facebook said, hey, you know what? It's really possible to manipulate online cues and influence in real time behavior and outcomes and feelings. I mean, that's like the 2016 election and what happened with Facebook. So it's very real, but it could be accomplished while bypassing everybody's awareness that this is happening. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is Pokemon Go. How many of you guys did any participate in Pokemon Go? So Pokemon Go was that, it was like a scavenger hunt. Would you say that would be an accurate description of it? It was you had clues, and you had to, and when I came out, I thought, oh, cool, get kids outside, get kids working together. But as it ends up, there was a real game of behavior modification for profit. So let's create this game, but we're going to bring you, some of the scavenger hunt will bring you to a Starbucks or to McDonald's or to the local pizza joint, who in turn are paying Google to be on that map so that they can get people coming to their place and spend money. So it's akin to advertisers paying for click-through to their websites. So that was one thing in terms of manipulation. It's not just with kids, it's also with all of us as adults. And then there was this other article that was, the title is on the bottom, 12 million phones, one data set, zero privacy. And this was about the fact that there are private companies that collect data out there, tons of private companies that collect data. We all know that the minute you open your phone or your computer, there's data being collected, no matter what you're doing on it, or how much you feel like you've turned things off. Well, the New York, a source from one of these data companies came anonymous because they felt like they're very concerned about how this data was going to be either used or abused. And so they gave this pile of data to the New York Times, which included data collected from 12 million phones in locations. It was over 50 billion location pings. And that's what they were tracking, all these location pings. And it was no privacy. So you could probably find one of your pings in that data set if it was only over a period of 2 months. So in 2 months, 50 billion pings. And basically, the one thing that jumped out at me was about the App Store. So in the decade that the App Store has been created, all of us, app by app, have consented to a surveillance system, short of any other better word, which is run by these private companies. And as our decade has now ended, tens of millions of Americans, including many children, our kids, have these what they were referring to as spies in our pockets. So not only spies in our pockets, but we put them by our bedside every night. And not really thinking that, oh my goodness, like this is actually tracking me in some ways. Even though these corporations that control their data are far less accountable than the government would be. So apparently it's kind of a little Wild West out there in terms of these data companies because there's not too many regulations in place right now. It's kind of like building the plane while flying it. So now it's, I guess we better put in some regulations about this. So that was just that was my little aside because I felt like that was important to just bring in. But going back to the Common Sense Media report, there was one of the high school students who was interviewed. This is actually her quote, her word. It's hard to have peace of mind, to truly relax, because even if you aren't looking at your phone, you know that something is there, a message, an experience waiting to be answered or joined. It's like a parallel universe that you're carrying around in your head every day, and it's really stressful. I thought that was really well stated. It's like a parallel universe. Here's my life, I'm living it every day, but right over here in this little device is my parallel universe, and I can't get myself to step away from it. So that's a reality for some kids, not for all kids, but for some kids. Screen time versus family time. How many of you interact with your kids like one-to-one interaction with your child like 6 hours a day? 2 hours a day? Great, okay. Maybe 15 minutes a day. It isn't, I didn't think anybody would raise their hand for 6 hours a day, but remember those numbers up there. How much, so what the relationship that your child has with the device is definitely 6 hours a day. And what happens is this ratio of screen time versus family time, it's when kids enter school, especially, not necessarily 5 years old at kindergarten, but as they get older, that's when that ratio begins to change. And the change, it parallels this transition what's called like your foundation vertical years. Vertical years meaning that when a child is raised from a very young age with a parent or parents, that child, that's like your vertical relationships. These are your primary vertical relationships. But then they enter school, and boom, it goes out horizontally. Horizontally meaning lots of different relationships. So that is a primary influence in when kids enter school, and that family time changes as a result of that. And usually, when they're getting into their tween years, that's when you see screen time overtaking family time. That's very typical is when you see it. So better or worse, your kid's relationship with the device is going to be one of the most, if not for some kids, the most significant relationship for them, that one-to-one relationship. So that's a fact that these kids are growing up with now. Very different. As you said, we went to a library and we used a card catalog. You had to talk to a librarian. You didn't sit at a computer and do any of that. So I know that all sounds like, oh my goodness, that's like, whew, what are we going to do about this? Well, there is some hope, that there's reasons to be hopeful. I think the most important thing is that individually and collectively, there's a consciousness that's really rising to the top here that, oh my, this is getting a little out of control and we need to pull back. So how can we do that individually, and how can we do that collectively at schools, families, communities, and even society at large? It's even crept into the policy-making level, meaning that there has not been enough really research out there. So instead of researching decades ago in anticipation of this, the research is trying to catch up now. There is research, but not as much as there can or should be. And even the big tech players, they're saying, oh boy, we got to figure out how to have more digital well-being. And their pressure is not just coming from policymakers or from the outside, it's coming from the inside, within their employees of their own organization, saying, it's got to shift. We can't continue like this. So there is a acknowledgement and there's a recognition that we need to be more conscious about this, not just definitely for our kids, but for ourselves as well. So I want you to pull one of your handouts. It says on top, dialogue questions. And because there's so few room, I'm just going to kind of move you into groups. And it looks like you got 3, you got 4, you got 4. Would one of you guys mind coming up here just so that these 2 ladies aren't by themselves? Let's just even out the group a little bit. Oh, yeah, you can turn it. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Because you're just going to kind of be collected in a group. So instead, we don't need to count off and do anything like that. But what I want you to do with this, let me grab a copy of it too, is I'm going to say that this is group 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And what you're going to do with that is you're going to use these dialogue questions. So the dialogue questions, you see, it says dialogue number 1. Does everybody see what I'm talking about? And then you see the question, and then look down a little bit. Follow-up question, everybody see that? I don't want you to read. I don't want you to be in your little groups and start reading. I want you to just start by looking at the questions, the 2 questions, and think about how would your child respond to this question. So think about that. And then after you've kind of discussed with each other how your child might respond to it, look at the takeaways. So just kind of, I don't mean read line by line, but just kind of scan through the takeaways. And then after you do that, discuss how each other's input and what you saw in the takeaway would impact. How would that help you in terms of talking to your own child? And then I will just ask you to share something from your group so we can debrief together. So you'll have 10 minutes together. I'll give you like a 2-minute warning, and then we'll have a few minutes to kind of debrief at the end. Any clarifications or questions about what you're doing? Okay, go for it.
Anyway.
I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Okay. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have access. He's got an idea.
Okay.
Well, 17 and 18.
Okay.
I've lost the battle.
So you're up there,
There's a lot of
One of my kids actually texted during
he's like,
When they have an app, how do I Snapchat you? Oh, I don't have that. What? So many kept happening and happening. And she's like, Mom, that's
All right. I know.
we like FaceTime.
No, I kind of wish it was a longer workshop so you could have more time to talk. Okay, anything from this group that emerged that you feel like would
I'll
be
use this so they can,
perfect for the greater good?
What was our our aha moment? Well, I loved what you said. We're outside of social media and responsibility on social media is when the maturity levels you start to see kids making better choices and their judgment is maturing and they're getting better at it and wiser at it, then you see that correlating back to their choices on social media as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And a big takeaway from your daughter on the comparison, right? Like comparison. I mean, she's doing great. She's graduated. She's on a farm. She's working hard, fulfilled, but yet she's still comparing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And how it's hard to rein that in. That's being human. We
Right.
do that.
It is being human.
Yeah.
And we all did it ourselves without social
Completely.
media
We all do
when we
it
were
still as
kids.
adults.
Yeah.
You have to rein yourself in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Group back here, anybody have any?
We kind of got on a tangent, just,
It's okay, tangents are good.
Yeah, tangents are fine. No rules about tangents.
there's, I mean, I don't even know if this is relevant, but just, I think overall we got to this point where we're like, we wish there was like more of a filter, like of what was being presented all the time to your kids. You know, that, and that also something you mentioned too that I really liked was you do the best you can at home, but seeing other parents not really reeling it in and putting parameters around how much free time or how much exposure or what they're letting their kids do.
Right.
And trying to manage your family with that pressure.
Yeah, it's hard. Your kids don't live in a bubble. None of us live in a bubble, and it's very hard to keep your values and your beliefs within the cocoon of how you want to protect your child. Yeah. Now, did your group have anything to?
Do you want to share? We got off on a tangent.
Another tangent, that's a great.
We'll share your tangent. It all stemmed from us not knowing, me not knowing what TikTok is. And
Oh, that's one of the kids' favorites.
I still don't know what it is. I should go on that, huh? But, it's like I don't even know what to ask or what to look into. 'Cause I don't even know.
Right.
That's
right.
it.
And actually, that, in some ways, I'll just make one comment about that. Kids really do like, if you were to go to, a great niece, nephew, I did this with my great niece, it's like, show me how you use this. Show me what this is. I wanted to see her perspective. This is a 12-year-old using TikTok. Show me what you do with this. So they love to explain it. Your group, anything to?
Some of the things I think we just spoke about is just how at this age, well, a couple of us have 12-year-olds. Just at this age, I mean, it's just how they communicate with one another and just how public it is in the sense of you may have a conversation or an exchange with one other person on a text.
Right.
But the next thing you know, if that conversation goes south or something embarrassing and said whatever, it's the world of screenshots now.
Yeah.
And I'll be very honest, I tend to do a scroll through my son's text from time to time, just do a little clean sweep and see what's going on. And it's amazing how, an ugly exchange between two kids suddenly got blasted out to 20 kids within seconds.
Right.
And you're thinking, this should have never gone this far,
Right.
right? I mean, they should have worked it out. It would have been 3 o'clock in the schoolyard growing up and
Exactly.
just had gotten over it, But now it's everyone, and it is the bullying of, hey, we shouldn't be friends with him, and come on, and piling on, and are you going to pile on with everyone else and get on board with it? And it's such a shame because it's shifted. The whole social interaction is, shifted. So.
Right. It has shifted, and there's so much to keep track of now. That, as you said, like looking through your son's text, you just see that, whoa, and that's what you see. Then there's that what you don't see.
I just wanted to add to your comment. Oh, man. Just how
I think how easy it is for things to escalate and get out of hand, like you were saying. Whereas if they had been talking to each other face to face, one, they might not have ever said that to somebody's face, right?
Right.
And two, you wouldn't misread their intent or what they meant by something as
Right.
much. And so, and then, yeah, you've got all these other kids involved, and, oh, he said, she said. You know, I hear about that from my daughter. She doesn't have a device, but the kids around her, so-and-so said
Right.
this to so-and-so, and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to add to that. But that's kind of I think that's a really big issue.
It is.
That
It
things
is.
escalate so quickly.
Right. It's big and it's common. So it isn't uncommon when you have that happen. Which brings me just to this last slide before the next section, being the training wheels. So using the analogy of teaching your kids to ride a bike. So you know when you teach your kids to ride a bike, whether there's literal training wheels or you are the training wheel, you're teaching them, you're guiding them, you're giving them support. It's all about safety. You want them to succeed. They could fall down, but they get up again, you know that. But you're not going to just push them out onto a busy highway and say, have fun, you know, that you're not going to do that with a child when you teach them to ride a bike. Same thing in terms of giving them a digital device and sending them out in that massive digital superhighway. Without the guidance, without the support, without the expectations, without the constant communication. They need that. They need those training wheels. So be the training wheels. And it's never too late to be the training wheels. You could start that tomorrow, being the training wheels.
In our situation, I'm 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we just moved to this area, and where we were before, everyone was sort of holding tight. Like, no, as a group, we're not getting phones because we're waiting until 8th or whatever, 9th grade. So it's a whole different world. We were coming in, and 95% of 6th grade has his phone, you know, and that's fine. And I get it. There's a lot more independence here, and, you know, there's a lot of pluses to being able to communicate with your child and whatnot. But we know we're going to have to probably make that decision and go for it, but I feel like I should be spending this time between now and the time we hand that phone over and sort of getting ourselves a little bit smarter, figuring out what the parental controls are, where are
Yes, yeah.
roadblocks and all that. And I'm just wondering, maybe I haven't done enough research, but are there good resources and tools and things to think about? Because it's almost like I don't know what I don't know. I have my own phone, but I'm not thinking.
Yeah, the one place I would tell you to start is Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media has a whole parent section, and they have excellent resources, excellent guidance. They've done a lot of footwork, so you don't have to do the footwork. So as a parent, you could just go on there and go, oh, I mean, they review movies, they review apps, they review everything. So, and tell you by age level, they'll give you guidance about what age in terms of getting a phone, and so I would start there. That would be the place to start. Okay, so part 2. So, you know, kids kind of want what all kids want. They want independence. They want to try it. You know, look at the kids here, sitting here. You know, they kind of want to belong. They want to be independent. They want to express their identities. And it's really no different than when we were tweens and teens. So when I was a tween and teen, and I look at those, I'd say pretty much all of them. They all were important. It's not that my family wasn't important. My family was important, but what was front and center in my life were my peers. You know, my family was just there. It's like, okay, great, they're there. But man, it was all about the peers, and it was all about fitting in. You really wanted to belong. So, you know, what kids want now, what we wanted then, and even what our parents wanted, it's not that different. What's different is the environment in which we live in, society in which we live in. And that's the big difference. That's what's changed. But what we want is essentially the same. So do you think this is a myth or a truth? Social media alienates teens. Both? Sounds like most of you are both. Well, if you look at, again, this is from Common Census, myth, because 57% of all teens have made new friends online, 68% have had online friends that support them through tough times. So a fairly high percentage of kids would reach out online to get that support. And then they were interviewing boys who are gamers, which by no means says that only the boys are gamers. I know a lot of girls who are gamers, but this was just specifically in interviewing the boys for common sense. 84% of them said that they feel more connected when they're actually playing a game online. So it isn't necessarily that social media is alienating them. That's sometimes our impression and our perception, but that's not necessarily what they are feeling and they are experiencing. The one thing that we do know is that if you let media use you, meaning just take over your life. So that's the one thing that we do know that can happen. And what you may not be able to read too well because of the color is that the definition of technology addiction has not really been agreed upon out there yet. What has been agreed upon is the feeling of addiction. So addiction is front and center and being talked about, but it's the feeling of addiction. And kids will say, yeah, I do feel 50%. I do feel it. Parents say, yep, they're definitely addicted. Multitasking is rampant. You might have a kid with a video, playing over here, their iPad, they've got, some kind of music here, they've got their phone here, they're doing homework on their computer, literally, have this much going on, and think that that's just fine. Kid, can they do it? Sure, they can do it. Is that a problem? Yeah, it does interfere. Multitasking is not a good thing for any of us, really, whether it's a child, a teen, or an adult. It's really not good for any of us. And then there are over 80% that says, you know what? It makes no difference. It's neutral in our relationships. So, there's that aspect of it is that, I don't feel indifferent. But remember that fear of missing out and the anxiety that it causes is very real for the kids. What we do know is that quantity matters. So how much time they're on makes a difference. And then, so that's the one thing, is the time, what they're using it for. So the kids that are passively, just constantly scrolling and scrolling, or they scroll and then they put their phone down and less than 30 seconds later they pick it up again. And they scroll and they scroll and they put it down, they pick it up, put it down, pick it up. That's the ones that end up with issues, because it is more than just, it is that anxiety, because it is creating that anxiety. And then also the ones that are obsessed with the likes. That is something I think Instagram is looking at getting rid of that, changing that. So I think there's a lot of platforms that are saying, how can we change this? Because this is definitely becoming a problem. And then other factors, which is really all about balance. It goes back to what I talked about in the beginning. And that's part of our job as the adults in the room of saying, okay, we have got to create this balance for ourselves personally, because we're the role models, and then for our kids, and then with our family as a whole. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, too. Somebody had mentioned something about the brain in the beginning in terms of being the concern. I think a couple of you did. And if you think about the teenager, well, any brain is like it's a conductor in an orchestra. All these little pieces of the orchestra, all these parts of the orchestra. But for teens, it's not a full orchestra. So their brains are still developing. And you look at this, the picture here kind of speaks volumes, here's a teen learning to drive, and blink, there's the phone right there. Well, that prefrontal cortex, that is what is our critical thinking tool. And it's also what helps us realize that A leads to B. There are consequences for what we say, what we do, how we act. And for teens, that cortex is still developing all the way until 24 and older. So their ability to really critically think, to make those critical decisions, to think about consequences, it's not really there. And they also think that if they see something posted and then somebody makes a comment, that's forever. That's never going to change. So they see it as those absolute truths, and that they don't see that that actually can change, and it does change. And then they are totally preoccupied with what their peers think of them. But at the same time, developmentally, they're moving into that stage where it's not all about them. It's not just their first-person perspective. They're actually starting to have the ability to see a perspective outside of themselves. But then you couple that with the fact that they're obsessed with what everybody else thinks of them. So in the teenage brain, the bottom line is that it is evolving, and it's not evolving as fast as we'd like it to be. So they're going to make bad decisions, they're going to take risks, and they're going to have that constant need for peer approval. And you could use the analogy of Little Red Riding Hood. So, Little Red Riding Hood kind of like, kind of just was looking around the woods, happy-go-lucky, thinking everything's just dandy, fully trusting the woods, even trusting the wolf. And the woods, it can be like the vast digital world out there. So using the analogy here for our kids, entering this vast digital world, just trusting it because they've stepped into the real world. And, everything's fine. It's not disasters happening every day. So they're going to step into this digital world with that same kind of mindset. Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf, even though she had some clues, the eyes were big, the mouth was big, the teeth were big, the hands were big, but the wolf had an explanation for each one of those. And so Little Red Riding Hood kind of trusted that and didn't think beyond that, didn't think about any consequences. So just thinking of that analogy is oftentimes what our kids are doing, is they're stepping out into that vast woods. Sleep is a major issue. I just had a conversation with my 16-year-old great niece a couple weeks ago, and she said to me, I need sleep, and I'm aware of that. So she said she doesn't take her phone to bed. She leaves it out in the kitchen, and it never enters her bedroom. She gets 9 hours sleep because she knows that she's not going to function well without sleep. And I said, wow, okay, I'm impressed. She said, well, it's the truth. I'm really not happy when I don't sleep. And she turned off all her notifications. So, it was very positive to hear that there are kids out there doing this and being aware of it. But sleep is a major issue for kids. And 60% of kids are looking at this right before bedtime. I wouldn't even say within an hour. Sometimes it's right there next to them. And that blue light is something that interferes with sleep. There is definite research about how that interferes with that quality of sleep. 73% of teens, this is 5 years ago, keep in mind, and 58% of middle schoolers, they just don't get enough sleep. So those ages really need between 9 and 11 hours of sleep. And most kids don't get that because either they're distracted, it's interfering with their sleep, or they actually have it in their room and they're constantly checking it. Some kids will stay up and post videos or games or whatever they're doing, so they're not getting the sleep that they need. And I was just reading something from the, I forget which university it was, but it was a large-scale study that was saying that without enough sleep, the percent of kids, I think it was 56 or 58% of kids develop some kind of behavioral issues over time because they're not getting enough sleep, which makes sense. We all get crabby when we don't get enough sleep. So I'm not going to take too much time on this because you have a handout, and it is a handout that says the 11 social media red flags, but I want to just tell you about what's in here so you have a point of reference. So it's going to talk about, these are things that you should pay attention to. Like the first one is ads and in-app purchases, and they gave examples of Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, described it and what to do. So you'll see each one of these, anonymity, cyberbullying, public default settings, real-time video. So each one of these, and that just, so you could take time to read about this on that handout. So that's what the list of all of those are. And that's just for you to say, ooh, these are things I really need to pay attention to. In terms of what do you watch? So there's kids, you have the typical normal development that kids have in child development. And these are things that you see anyway. I mean, whether or not there was even digital devices in our world right now, you would see this typical development. So popularity matters, fitting in, independence, that's where kids really start kind of stepping away from you as the family structure and claiming their independence. Of course, they care what everybody thinks about them. Emotions are like, whew, you see them more than just swinging. It could be vast changes in emotions. Exploring their sexuality as well as their identities. All of this is normal and what you would expect for a teen and tween development. So this is nothing to be alarmed about. Green light, yellow light will look like, this is changes. So this is when you start seeing changes. And you don't want to because then you say, well, changes are part of their development. Yeah, it is. But you know your kid. So you need to be able to look at, are they anxious and on edge after being online? Not the normal anxious, but you're thinking, yeah, this is getting a little bit too high strung. Maybe they're more irritable. Maybe those emotional swings are turning into pretty major outbursts. Secretive, all of a sudden, they're not just glued, but, you walk in the room and, they've changed something, that kind of secretive kind of behavior. Withdrawing, wanting to be alone. So those are all yellow light, like, oops, I got to start paying attention. The red light is your clear warning signs. So this is, if you got any kind of self-harm, suicidal, just asking about it or making comments about it, or they wrote some kind of paper about it. The withdrawal that you see that your kid, that this is way more than what they normally would. You see academics changing. You see changes in what they're either eating or not eating. The fact that they really aren't sleeping, and you could see that now in them. They're crying. That is not just like an issue. There's a continual kind of depressive state. So all of these things are, as I said, they are red lights that you just can't continue to watch. This is where you have to step in and interfere. And each kid is different in terms of how this manifests. So there isn't a necessarily, well, how anxious is anxious? And one of the ways that you can look at this is like a health scale. So, when you go to the doctor and they say, okay, how much does it hurt on a scale of 1 to 10? We always have a hard time with that. Oh, I don't know, 6, you kind of guess something. Well, you can talk to your kids about how are things going? And you can't be that general. You could be more specific. If you saw things that had to do with their academics or with their friends, you can ask specifically about, tell me on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 3 is thumbs up, everything's cool. 4 to 6, yeah, not so much. 7 to 10, yeah, I'm really doing badly with this. You can't just step in and have this kind of conversation with your child if you have not created a baseline for having this kind of communication. So let me just back up and say that first, is that you have to proactively create times to make those connections with your kids, really know your kids, so that you can even do your own 1 to 10 assessment and say, oh boy, I see a yellow light, I see we're in like a 4 to 6 range. And you could look at that green, yellow, and red, like the yellow, the 1 to 3, the 4 to 6, the 7 to 10. Mental health people are using what's called a HEADS assessment. You could be using the same thing in terms of watching your child and thinking about that red, yellow, green light. So how are things going at home? How about school? What about their activities? All of a sudden they dropped 6 activities that they were very involved in. And what about their friends? What about drug, alcohol, or tobacco use? Do you see them stepping out and trying something that they've never tried before? Or they're being very secretive about that? And then again, depression, suicide, and sexuality. Those are all areas that mental health experts are using to assess kids' mental health. So recap, part 1 was really about the reports, and then part 2 was the impact. So how does it impact their sleep? How does it impact their well-being? How does it impact their brains? And then what are the red flags? What are the red flags that you would be looking for, and what you can do about some of those things? Now to be a little bit more specific in this closing part, which is the fact that what you see up there, I think probably the most important ones are the ones, as I said, being proactively. Find positive ways to connect. So empathy and validation, expressing your love a lot. Know your kids' friends, stay in touch. All of those things are proactive. So this isn't something that you, after a problem, you start trying to do this. You start this ongoing relationship early, and you are consistent with that relationship. My niece, this is one that has a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, sits down with them weekly, individually and together. So it's like individual one-to-one time, and for them, she's divorced, so it's the 3 of them, and it's family time. And in part, what they're talking about is everything that was on that head's assessment. Talking about school, academics, they're talking about friends, they're talking about, literally talking about social media, looking at apps. So she's taking the time to go through and do this on a weekly basis. The one-to-one part is really cultivating and nurturing that relationship so that there's trust, and so that I feel like as a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old, I can tell you the truth. And I'm not going to be, I mean, we all hid things. I mean, we all lied to our parents when we were kids. You know, we didn't want to get caught. But, you know, if you have that relationship, then you know when things are really rough, that's when they need to be able to come to you. So being proactive. What you see here is just leading with empathy. And that's when we train our solution coaches in the No Bully program, we say you need to lead with the left hand of empathy. So it's always starting there, not the right hand of action. So our right hands, which is what we want to do as parents, we want to take action. But really what kids need, they need to be listened to. They need the empathy. Even at times where you might be really frustrated or you're rolling your eyes, you need to be empathy. So this is just an example I've noticed. Whatever the concerning behavior, it seems like maybe you're going through a hard time. I really want to hear about what's happening for you. If you'd rather talk to someone else, that's okay. We can do whatever you need. It might feel like you're alone, but you're not. I'm right here with you, and I love you very much. And if that's all you say, with no expectations for a response, because that's part of what we expect a response right then and there, and we kind of dig for that response. Sometimes that's all you have to say. You're laying groundwork. No response is a response, and oftentimes we don't accept that as being a response. If you feel like your child tripped and fell, meaning that, okay, maybe they're the ones that posted something and made some comments, in your son's text, maybe you saw something and went, whoa, I can't believe that he said that. So they might trip and fall in some way. And if they do, then, you have to kind of like take that step back without judging. That because immediately, you're probably shocked, you might be angry, you might be disappointed, without jumping to conclusions, because we never have the full picture. We might assume we have it, but we don't have the full picture. Or jumping into action, calling another parent or asking some kid something, just step back. So the most important thing is to listen. Listen, don't lecture. Just listen and put aside, your anger or your shock. And your child needs to know that the lessons are going to come later. But it's more about the fact that I love you, I care, and I want you to be safe. That's the message that they need to get first and foremost. So I'm not sure we're going to have time for this. I'm thinking that we probably won't, but as opposed to because these are some of the things that we started covering just before the end of part 1 and into part 2 and part 3 here. So I just want to know if you've got questions or comments about any of those bullets up there before we move on to the closing part. Yeah.
How to best manage your child's time on digital devices?
You know, the time piece has to, I'm going to show you some suggestions and examples of that. But the biggest thing is you have to be pretty clear with yourselves as adults, you know, as the parent or parents, and say, okay, this is my expectation. Common Sense Media does have some guidelines, but all kids are different in terms of their maturity. So you can have an extremely mature 12-year-old that could have the phone and manage it for 6 hours a day without a problem. You can have an extremely immature 12-year-old that can't even manage it for an hour. So you really have to look at your individual child. And what I always say is look at how they manage things outside of a phone. How do they do with their homework? How do they do with their doing chores in the house? How do they do with being on time? How do they look at everything, all of those parameters first? And that's going to give you a clue about your child in terms of managing their time. So treat it individually versus, you know, what general suggestions might be out there. And those are some of the parameters to look at.
Is it okay if I share a couple of general?
Yeah, absolutely, please, because that was part of what this was going to be.
I have a sister who has 4 teenagers. So my daughter's 11 and she doesn't have a device yet. But she has one, and they use something called custodial. It's like custodial, but with a Q.
Just so we can get it on the...
Oh, okay. It's like custodial, but with a Q. And then they can, from their phones, it's an app, you put it on all their devices, and the parents can see their children's messages, they can see what they've done, you know, and they can also set timers for different apps and allow some for some kids and not allow some for other kids. And that's been something that they've shared, or my sister has shared, that's just been really huge and helpful for them. And the kids know that their mom gets a report at the end of the day about like what they were on, or can read their messages, right? And then they're going to be a little bit more careful about what they say, and even maybe the friends that they interact with who might, you know, they're like, oh, I'm not going to talk to that person on social media because they always say offensive things and my mom will see it or something. Anyway.
Right.
And then the other thing that we do in our family, which has been really great for my husband and I as well, is that we have a timer, a plug timer for our Wi-Fi, and it automatically shuts off. At our family, it's at 8 o'clock at night, and that way he can't work, I can't work, which is very frustrating at some times. But it's been so much better for our health, for our sleep, and then we have time together as a family. And so sometimes we'll reset it on the weekend if we're going to watch a movie together or something like that. But that way, I think we as parents, you know, we don't have all the willpower that we want either.
Right.
And so it's really nice to just have it automatically shut off. And then after 8 o'clock, we can read a book, we can play a game, you know, we can make love, we can do something other than being on our devices, right? And building our relationships in another way. And so those are a couple things that I think have been really valuable.
Great.
For our family.
Thank you. So custodial with the Q. And then the timer on the Wi-Fi. I love the timer with the Wi-Fi. That is a fabulous idea. Then it's not tempting.
And it's automated.
Yep.
You know, you can change it on the weekend if you wanted to, but it comes right back on at 6 a.m. and you can change the time
Sure.
to fit your family.
Right.
Yeah. It's super helpful.
Yes, thank you.
And then you, no, you just buy, it's like a $10 timer. And you just plug it into the wall and you set the time. And then it shuts off and you can just push the reset button if you want to turn it back on. But that way you can also make sure your kids aren't on their devices at night.
Right.
Right? While they're sleeping, which I think, you know.
Which is way better than just trying to take the device away. Yeah.
But that way
Mhm.
and you get notifications, that kind of thing, so.
And it states the values you have. So I think that's the more important part too, is that your values then are front and center and really clear.
You can even set it to go off and back on, like from 6 to 8, if you're like, this is our family time, we eat dinner, and you can set it for just that time, and then again at night, like you can do a lot with
Right.
timers, and it's just automated, which makes it super easy.
Great, thank you.
I wanted to share. Can you hear me? And it came to me to share this because my son got a Chromebook in the spring. They have them at school.
Right.
His dad thought it was a good idea to get a Chromebook. Again, I was thinking he could just use the school one. That would be good. But he got this Chromebook, and then I'm the more technological one. And so all of a sudden, I had the task, because I said, well, did you get parent controls on there? No. Like, well, how are we going to do that? Oh, I'm not sure. Can you just do that? And so here I was tasked with doing the parent controls. But it was a real learning experience, because I said, well, I need access to the computer. So my son brought it over, gave me the computer. Well, you have to change ownership of the computer, right, to do the parental control. So I did that. Well, it was a huge catastrophe. And the thing that really, the bottom lining it with all the story is he felt like I was sneaky. And I get it. And I was just really honest with him. I said, I've never navigated this with an 11-year-old. I mean, I didn't even have an email until I was in college. I mean,
Right.
I have no idea. This is all new, and I get it. And so our big takeaway is now he does have the Chromebook. He lost it for 5 months. Maturity just wasn't there.
Right.
Entitlement, which I felt. So he got it back for 6th grade, and it's going really well. There are no parent controls on it, actually, because he is just doing Audible. So he's showing me everything he's doing. He comes and shows it to me. So until I see something where it's questionable, then we'll have to do a parent control. But he does only through the docs at school, and it's great. That's all working well, but everything we do is open communication. So anything I do, we sit together and do it. And so the level of trust, we had to repair a lot, but he really felt like I was like spying on him, you know? And it was really, really eye-opening. So just some advice around that you don't have to go through the heartache that I did for a month or so.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, in light of time, I'm going to move on. So these are all in your handout, but what I'm just going to talk about a few of them on each slide, because there's like 4 or 5 slides. So there's effects of social media. What can you do? You need to take them seriously, and a comment like, it must feel really hard to feel like you have to measure up to someone else. If you feel like, oh gosh, think about yourself at work. You might have somebody at work or in some social group where you feel like he or she is just always doing things perfectly. And all the time you think, gosh, how come I keep screwing up? That it's so that the measuring up is a real thing that all of us feel. And I think that kids need to hear. The duck syndrome, it's actually not, having web feet. It's really it was actually a phrase coined by some Stanford researchers about how when we see ducks on the surface, oh, it looks so smooth and calm, but underneath, oh, those little feet, they're paddling like crazy. That, what, everybody can look perfect, you can manipulate anything, but indeed none of us are perfect. And so pulling back that curtain on perfection and then also emphasizing effort and fostering. It's okay to make mistakes and do things wrong, because that's how we learn. Pressure, there's constant pressure. So one of the things is, again, making a comment like, I bet sometimes it feels hard to keep up with all this, so maybe we could look at your settings. When I had the conversation with my 16-year-old great niece about her deciding to turn off her notifications and take a break. And that was something that she kind of did on her own versus her mom and my niece going after her, because she felt like it was an onslaught. It was too much. And now she's having conversations with her peers about that. So to be able to talk about that, but then it becomes the role model and setting limits and creating, like having exactly what you described. So we're going to have dinner together, Wi-Fi is going to be off. This is our family values. You need to be very explicit about that. So don't assume that your kids know what those are. The drama, there's always drama. There's drama. Think about when we were kids. There was drama. So with social media, it's accentuated and it's expanded because it can go out far and wide. So it's helping them think through that drama, again, being empathetic about it, being aware of any type of cyberbullying, and we'll talk about that next month. That's going to be kind of the focus for next month, is more about cyberbullying. But really kind of talking to them about, this is an opportunity for you to be an upstander. Just like if you were in a group of kids and somebody was picking on another kid, if you say, hey, you know what, cut that out. And then the isolation. So, like this is, sometimes we're, I notice you want to stay in your room. I'm curious, what's going on. Is there anything? Sometimes when kids become that isolated, you kind of want to take the device away. Be careful about that. Because remember, for so many kids, it's a lifeline. You're taking away their lifeline. So you need to really kind of step into that carefully before you would do something like that. And then, in terms of your family, how are we going to create balance? Where are our private spaces and times going to be? Do you think that you spend more or less time? You spend less time. And it's going to vary. But generally, this makes sense, parents are spending more. However, that includes watching TV, videos, your social media, it includes work, but work was only a couple hours, web browsing, anything that you do. So we as adults, we're not always the best role models in terms of the time. And of course that differs by every individual. This is just the general. And remember, comparing that to the 6 hours that tweens and the 9 hours that teens spend on the screens. This is a family media agreement, and this is on Common Sense Media's website. And this is something that, in terms of, we were talking about it at your group, something that you could be using, and having it in writing and being able to sit down one-on-one. Again, this is part of your relationship building. So having that conversation about what are our values, what do we believe, and what's important. And this is going to help. So that's a family. Oh, and by the way, it's by grade level. So it's, what you might have as your 8-year-old different than what you have with your 16-year-old. So bottom line, it can help your kid learn. And there is a sunny side of the street. They actually make those connections. They reach out. They get that support from friends. They get to be creative. They get to be critical thinkers. They get to use those skills that they may not otherwise get to use. And when it's used in balance, then it could actually help kids connect and families connect. So there is that upside to it, but balance is the key word. And these are just some statistics, in terms of, they use it a lot, but, it's kind of neutral. They don't feel better or worse. They do feel less lonely, or they feel better about themselves, or they feel less anxious or less depressed. So those are all upsides of what it actually is doing for them. So it does actually contribute to some of their well-being. And that's the confusing part of it, is that it does both. There are some great digital resources. These are in your handout, and these are really for not your major mental health issues, but for, some things, your yellow light pieces. So yellow light pieces, and this is, so attitude with mindfulness, with meditation. These are just different apps. These are all reviewed on Common Sense Media's website, and I listed them in your handout. This is just a slide that I use in every parent training. We used it last month. And this is really talking about the center, bullseye, kids' use of devices. Who influences that? Everything you see listed underneath. And the order of that impact changes. So it changes in terms of the influence being more as they get older. You see that change. So you can't always control the who, the what. Remember we said that you're not with your child 24/7. But you can control the how, and that comes down to your family values that you had set up with your family. And just to know, screens are everywhere, so look for quality, minimize that multitasking, think about balance, your role model, create those tech-free zones. Some of your next steps, it's never too late to start with those training wheels. So even if your child is 16 years old, you can put those training wheels back. It's not too late. Tread carefully. Remember that FOMO pressure is real. Download, print, complete, and do with your children, the family media agreement. App updates. Many app updates include security patches. And that has to do with locations and kids being tracked. So do those app updates. Be careful about unsecured Wi-Fi. So if you're uploading something to social media and you've got unsecured Wi-Fi, then anybody and everybody can have access to that. And then you've got resources in your handout, and you have another handout is Common Sense Media. It's questions and answers. So it's, questions, and it gives you some answers in terms of more resources. Well, what if somebody uploaded a picture of my kid and I didn't want them to do that? What can I do about that? That's just one of the questions on there. This is one of the board members from Common Sense Media, and she's also an author and educator, and she was asked about, well, what are the upsides? This is going to be our last slide. And she just said, I kind of think about this quote from Ram Dass, who said, we're all just walking each other home. And in terms of the positive part of social media, I think social media is a wonderful way to demonstrate you care. You take an interest in someone. This is the positive side of social media. You can see the healing power as we start to radiate kindness and goodness and gratitude through our tweets and our posts. So there is tremendous power in this thing. But it's our job as grown-ups to teach kids how to be responsible citizens in this new realm. So going back, you're not going to put your kid out in that wide world of the superhighway out there. You need those training wheels. So thank you. Thank you for we're over 7 minutes, and I apologize for that, but we're kind of crammed here. And just knowing that your commitment, your dedication is going to help your child to nurture that inner core of kindness and respect that will allow them to use that social media in a positive way. So thank you again. Hang in there.